lots going on at this meeting.
Hey, Todd. Yeah, I think the way that you framed it there is exactly the way it's playing out. So healthcare was supposed to be the focus, as it kind of normally is when premiers all get together, just because of how big of a deal that is in each province, and there's provincial jurisdiction over healthcare. But the politics of this carbon tax carve-out has certainly dominated discussion. And I have in my hands here, fresh off the press, the kind of communique, the final statement that all premiers released. And I have to tell you, the second paragraph is about that issue, about the carve-out. Climate change, it reads, is a key concern for Canadians. Provinces and territories are taking action to address climate change and have made significant investments over time to meet the needs of their jurisdictions. Here's the but. Premiers express concern that federal actions around the federal carbon tax have treated Canadians differently and expect the federal government to support all Canadians fairly. Premiers are unanimous in calling on the Prime Minister to ensure that federal policies and programs are delivered in a fair and equitable way to all Canadians, particularly in light of the affordability challenges being faced across the country. They talk about infrastructure, they talk about housing, but it's that paragraph that is the most politically significant. To get all the premiers in one room to agree on the language and the sort of direction of what they're going to call the Prime Minister out on is not insignificant. Especially that it includes the voices, for example, outside of the ones who have been most sort of pronounced in the way that they've been calling on Ottawa. You mentioned them, the premiers of Alberta and Saskatchewan. This includes a whole lot of other premiers, including the ones in Atlantic Canada, for example, who now seem to give an indication, and we'll find out more in the press conference, that they would like this kind of a carve-out applied more fairly across the board. And of course, that comes up against the backdrop, Todd, of what's happening in Ottawa not too long from now, which is a vote on the Conservative motion to expand that carve-out to all sources of home heating.
Hey, so what do you think the implications are here, Vassy, as we're watching this all kind of playing out in real time, and the continued pressure now on the Trudeau government, whether it's from the provinces and some of these premiers we're showing here in the room in Halifax, or whether it's from now this upcoming vote, involving the Conservatives and the New Democrats teaming up?
I think both of them speak to a lot of pressure, and not necessarily coming from the usual places, which is why, in my view, it becomes a little bit more significant. And I say that not to diminish the pressure that comes from the usual places. So Conservative premiers, for example, who don't like, in general terms, the federal government's climate policy. The difference here is that this is about one part of Canada and the other parts, and the principle of applying things that you do fairly. Now, the federal government says, look, there's lots of other stuff we do for other regions in other veins. This isn't the first time that that's happened, but for whatever reason, and there's a myriad of them, that isn't landing, right? And so you have people like the federal NDP who are normally supportive politically of the majority of what the federal government does, particularly on the climate file, for the first time siding with the Conservatives. There's a whole amount of pressure derived from that. And then you have premiers here, some of whom are allies of the federal government, many of whom are benefiting in this case from the carve-out, also saying in a concerted way, we think the fairness of principle is not being applied here. And so you posit that, push it up against what the Prime Minister said last week, which is no more carve-outs, no way, no how. And I think you have the makings of a classic political fight. I just don't see how it gets resolved.
Vassy Kapelos, host of Power Play Question Period, joining us live from Halifax. Thanks, Vassy.